Back on Morning Line, it is our final segment this morning with Barbara McGinnis with Takis and McGinnis Elder Law. If you'd like to join in the conversation, 737-7587 is the number, or you can email me and I can share the questions with Barbara McGinnis. A lot of people have general questions that we've covered before, Barbara. I've got an email question here for you along the lines of, when you go to set up a will, if they go to someone like you, and these are people that maybe have never done it before and they realize, yeah, it's high time we do this, what should they expect? Can you give them a realm? And I know it varies, whether they go to you or somewhere else, or perhaps try to do it themselves by downloading some form off the internet, and you can say whether or not you think that's a good idea. But what can it cost? Because for a lot of people, they don't have a huge budget for these things. You're a high-powered lawyer. Can you handle this? How big does the estate have to be? What does it cost, and what kind of effort does it take to set up a good standard will for, I would say, a modest middle-income estate?
So I would tell you that the cost of trying to do it yourself and doing it incorrectly could be a lot more than hiring an attorney to help you with that.
Okay.
And here's what I mean by that. I've had several family members come in, not family members, but several clients come in. We're frozen, aren't we?
Yeah, we're frozen. I can hear you right now, though.
We've had several. Okay, well, I'll keep talking then.
Okay.
We've had several clients come in where they have prepared a will themselves. It's absolutely okay to prepare a will by yourself in the state of Tennessee. It's called a holographic will. That needs to be in your own handwriting, your own signature, dated. It doesn't need to be notarized. It doesn't need to be witnessed. But trying to probate that becomes increasingly difficult. So not recommended, right? The other thing that perhaps is even worse is when you cut and paste from documents you find on the internet and you're trying to do it on the cheap, right? You think this is it works for somebody, it's bound to work for me. It may be improperly executed. It may be actually just not having the intended consequences that you wanted it to have. So it costs a lot more in the long run. Incidentally, this Thursday, we are offering pro bono estate plans for some frontline healthcare workers. We've set aside 8 hours to do free estate plans for frontline healthcare workers as a way of thanking our healthcare community for what they've been doing this past year, what they do always, but particularly this past year. Now, our calendar is full, so as you can imagine, so estate planning can be free and be okay, but it can cost a few $1,000s. But if you think that in the long run, you're saving your estate and your heirs in money and aggravation by doing it correctly.
Yeah.
So I definitely think this is not a do-it-yourself project. It's kind of like trying to do your own plumbing or something. You know, you could probably do it, but the likelihood of you messing it up and creating a bigger problem is very likely.
Yeah, I understand that. It's interesting. One of the first stories Tim used to tell, and I haven't brought this up with you before, the whole thing about the individual who had a napkin and wrote "all to Ma." That's Tim's favorite line. He goes, I just left it all to Ma. And it was an envelope, a napkin, and that's where it was, and they had that to work with. And he said, technically speaking, even something like that can be used, but you can imagine a lot of questions can be brought up, and depending on what's involved and how many heirs are involved, it can just create huge problems, right?
Yep. So one thing I've been doing during our breaks, I've been trying to follow and do some bill tracking on House Bill 2018, and it says it's by Sparks, by Representative Sparks.
Sure.
And it has to do with modifying the Tennessee rule or statute on electronic monitoring devices in a nursing home. This is Chapter 68, Chapter 11, Title 68, Chapter 11, Part 9 is amended, and it's amending the electronic monitoring device rules in nursing homes in particular. So a lot of times, now we're relying on these electronic tools to stay in touch with our family members. And it's one thing when our person can pick up the phone and talk to us or communicate, but what if they can't? So products like the Echo Show and the Facebook portal, they would make it easier to stay connected. We run into barriers from facilities that, even if they allow it, maybe staff are turning them off. Well, this bill actually says they would penalize. There's a monetary penalty if it's reported that that those devices are turned off by anyone other than the resident or the authorizing family member. So maybe you can check this out, Nick, to see where we are in this rule. I think it would be very helpful to some of our families and residents in staying connected. It's also going to be a time saver for the staff in the facility so that we can use these devices and not have to rely on staff to always get us connected. There's a $500 penalty per each day that the violation of turning the device off or tampering with it or destroying the device. So I think this would be something to follow.
Well, it's like you said, communication is so important. So that sounds like something you'd be in favor of. You think it's a good idea?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
If it makes it easier for people to, I'm wondering if I know Representative Sparks, if whether or not that's something that's been done in other states as well. I think a lot of what we're seeing develop now too anyway, under this COVID and pandemic, is going to continue on after we finally get this behind us, don't you think? If something like that's in place, especially for someone like me who lives in Nashville, my folks are right now in assisted living in Boise, Idaho. I mean, I'd like the idea of having something like that available, which wasn't until this pandemic hit.
Exactly. So necessity is the mother of invention, I guess. And we've got some of these products that have really blossomed, and they're affordable. They're widely available. And even, like you said, even post-pandemic, it's going to make it easier for us to stay in contact long distance with folks that may not be tech savvy. I'm not the greatest tech person in the world. I'd kind of like having a Facebook portal or something like that to make life a little bit easier. You can just kind of drop in and see how things are going.
And we've talked so much about the nursing homes, and you made the great point earlier about how a lot of loved ones see their elderly parents perhaps this time of year at their home for the first time and realize, they haven't seen them for a few months, maybe a few, weeks into the year, and all of a sudden they go and visit and they go like, wow, mom or dad has slipped to the point now where they just can't live alone anymore. And one of the toughest things I think any child has to do with regard to their parents is make that decision sometimes when the parents don't want to, and they still maintain some independence and get them to move. And I'm just knowing that there are some people that are going to go through that this year, and they're not going to know how to address that with a parent that they know is independent-minded and is not going to want to leave that home. And I know you and Tim helped me deal in large measure with my folks when we went through this. And I had some unique circumstances with us, but in a typical case, how does a family member broach this with them when, they still have independence? You can't forcibly necessarily move them. How do you get them to agree to go?
Well, I think you might want to start, depending on what the problem is, you might want to start with how can we provide help and support here in the home so that your needs are met, and I, as a child, feel that love you, feel comfortable with you being at home by yourself. How do we bridge those gaps in what it is that you need? You're going to be looking at things like how's their hygiene? How's their meals going? Are their bills unpaid? Or is mail stacked up? What kind of reserves do they have in their pantry and in their refrigerator? Are they living on little peanut butter crackers, or are they making real meals? You're going to be looking at all those things. And how do we bridge those gaps to make it safe? Do we bring in-home caregivers, somebody that can cook, help clean? Mom's going to say, I can do it. I don't want those people in my house. And you may say, it makes me feel better knowing that you're not by yourself. It makes me feel better knowing you don't have to work so hard. So sometimes everybody's unique, but
Yep.
turning it's not to help you, Mom, it's to help me feel good about you being there. And yes, I want you to be able to stay at home as long as possible. If that's the goal, then that's the goal. We're going to try to stay at home as long as possible. And how can we do it safely? When we do need to transition, maybe it's because they can't get out of bed by themselves anymore, or they can't toilet by themselves anymore. And we've got some pretty significant deficits, and assisted living is necessary. A lot of the same arguments. Let's try it. Let's go for a little while and see how it works out. Please stay over the winter, so I'm not worried about you and the weather. And that we try it for a little while. Assisted livings right now, at least most of the ones that I'm talking to, there's lots of opportunity for move-ins, meaning there's vacancies in these assisted livings. Don't forget, if you're moving into an assisted living and there are considerable vacancies, to negotiate your monthly rate. Assisted livings can negotiate with you their monthly rate, where you may not have that negotiating power if we're going into a nursing home. Another rational argument is, if you're getting the care you need now, it's much less likely that you're going to have a catastrophic event like a fall, a pneumonia, a urinary tract infection, malnutrition, dehydration, those kind of things that will necessitate an even higher level of care, or the dreaded nursing home admission. So paying for a little care now can help prolong or prevent needing nursing home placement in the future.
You know what makes sense to me? It's so much, it's psychological in how you approach it, and what you just said there makes sense. But your parents, of all things, they care for themselves, but they care for you even more. And if you can bring it up to them too, and I think you and Tim were sharing this with me, is just along the lines of, look, my brother and I, we worry about you, and it's frankly a stressor on us, concerned every day about whether or not you're getting what you need. And this would make it easier, I think, for all of us. And if all of a sudden they realize by doing this, maybe it would take some of the stress off of you, and they feel as though they're doing something for you as opposed to for themselves, they're more likely to do it, which is what a loving parent might do. It's the psychology of it, and the same approach may not work for everyone, but there is a psychology to it. It's not just a straightforward thing. It depends on every individual family, I think.
Well, and we're all so unique and different, but I know if somebody were to try to tell me I had to move into a facility, you have to do this, you're going to do this, I'm going to probably be more resistant than if somebody presents it to me as if I had some input. Let's go look at facilities and pick one that you like. Let's go visit some. Now, that may not be so easy during COVID. You might have to do some virtual visits, but where would you like to live? Would you like to live near me, or would you like to stay in your community? Assisted livings provide a lot of the same basic services, but the package in which they come in, meaning the building, the environment, there's a lot of variability. And, people have different lifestyles. So some folks may like a really fancy place, and some folks may like something that's a little smaller and homey.
There's plenty of places to shop around. Listen, as we wrap things up real quick, remind folks, Barbara, where the office is, and that folks can call with questions that don't cost a thing to find out whether or not they need to hire you, correct? I mean, they can make that call, and we'll give the information at the end of the show. But remind folks where you are, and you guys have offices around the state, don't you?
Actually, we do not have offices around the state. Our office is in Hendersonville, Tennessee.
Okay, I thought
probably. Yeah, Tim had an office in Cookville.
Oh, that's right.
Or, maybe like 15 years ago. But we haven't had it in quite some time.
Okay.
So our office is in Hendersonville, Tennessee. It's at 104 Windcrest Way. We did move this summer. We're in a nice, big, new building. And our phone number, 615-824-2571.
Okay, and listen, we're going to give that out again. We're at the end of time, but we'll put that up at the end of the program now as we wrap it. Barbara, thanks so much for joining us. Have a Merry Christmas, and my best to Tim and everyone else there, all right?
All All right. Merry Christmas.
Thank you
Bye.
so much. That's Barbara McGinnis with Takis McGinnis, and she gave you the details just a moment ago about where they're located, but when we come back, I'll pop that up for you as well and how you can call and get information. We'll be right back after this.